Hello, everyone. Welcome to a short talk I'm going to give on the changing nature and the future of work. Well, it should be clear to all of you that the ways of working, how we work, when we work, why we work, you know uh, where we work, we're changing, and that's really what I want to address in this presentation. So everything is changing quickly, and that was really even before the COVID-19 crisis and pandemic, which I'll talk more on later. But the ways of working today are very different from your parents' generation, where they may have worked at one or two jobs their entire life and then stopped and retired and hoped for a gold watch or a pension. That era is really over. I personally think that's good, because as I like to teach, it's important to figure out what your passions are, and then figure out how you can align what you really love to do around your passions, and therefore never have a need to really retire, to stop. Um, my definition of work is doing what you love for most of the day, for most of your life. If you look at what's changing, much research has suggested that about only a third of people really even like what they do and feel connected to what they do. And that's a problem when 70% of the working population, not only do they not like what they do, but they would change in a moment if they could. Today, about a third of all Americans now work from home. And that means, as contractors or in their own business or working part-time at many different jobs. And this is expected to increase to 80% by 2030. I want you to think about that for a moment. That means in not such a long time from now, clearly the majority of the working population will have what is called, which I'll talk about in a moment, the portfolio life. The idea is to figure out how to have a flexible schedule that makes the income that you retire, but also combines all of your interests and passions. One phenomena that I've noticed in the last few years, which I think is interesting, is that the idea of resumes and degrees are slowly being replaced and less valued versus badges or life skills. Resumes, of course, are still important, but they're not sufficient because our life is so much broader in terms of our skill sets. Degrees are important because I think it really helps you to learn. It helps you to think. But more and more organizations, and clearly if you go into business for yourself, are looking at, so what can you do for me? What life experiences have you had that might benefit us? What badges have you earned? And I think over the next few years, we've started to see this with LinkedIn. You'll see a growth of badge sites where basically whenever you learn a new skill, whether it's you've learned how to speak Spanish or you've learned how to program, you'll receive a badge for that. And that will be kind of added to your portfolio. So it's very interesting. So, the idea of careers are really fading away. And they're being replaced with the idea of independent work. Some of us have called this gig work. I think in the future, you will, not too distant future, you will maybe perhaps on Sunday night, swap through an app and figure out your working schedule for the week, where you're going to work, how you're going to work, and you'll contract those opportunities. This is already here. I think we're all Hollywood stars. In Hollywood, many people work independently. They're an expert at two particular things, and they contract themselves out. So this is a model that's really growing, and I think that's here to stay. Again, the idea of how, what, where, why, and when we work is empowering. There are so many cloud-based platforms that's enabling this new way of working. So some of you are familiar with Slack, or maybe Monday.com, or Microsoft Teams, or Zoom, or Trello, and Blink, and there's so many of them. So the technology is sort of here to enable these new ways of working. So many companies have said to their employees, you know what, work from home, maybe forever, because we see now that the importance of FaceTime isn't in the office, isn't as important as we thought it was. Companies are also benefiting with this new Hollywood model. They could hire experts when they need them and not hire them when they don't need them. so they could scale to meet demand. This, also gives them reduced healthcare costs, which is why we need a safety net around healthcare, which is another discussion. Companies are realizing that they just need less physical space, and so they're able to save money there and invest more money in other places, such as hiring experts. Now, the new ways of working are, in fact, causing challenges for companies. Companies have to struggle with, how do we maintain our corporate culture, which means they're going to have to do a lot more education around company vision and mission and values and behavior, because now your worker base, if you will, are a hodgepodge of full-time, part-time, temporary people that come in, come and go. And so maintaining the corporate culture, I think, is something that is really going to take an extra focus. Companies have to provide this enabling technology, these platforms, these mobile apps, to enable people to work much more efficiently and independently, which means the idea of supporting collaboration. Companies have to let go of the command and control model of management and really focus more on how do we enable collaboration. And so there's a lot of this need to drop a lot of this old controlling, as I like to call, management behavior. The new generation, Generation Z as an example, age 18 to 23, has grown up with working, independently with their phones and with different mobile apps. And to that generation, the biggest shift is to think about the fact that maybe full-time jobs are not as secure as their parents or their grandparents. If we look at the hundreds of freelance platforms, I've listed a few here, some of my favorites, that are out there where you can post work to be done and you could apply work that you want to do based on your expertise. I think all of you should at least figure out, and I talk about this in my other lectures on joyful work, what is one of your passions? If you had to sell a product or a service around your passions, what would it be? And then see as a test for yourself, if you posted that on one of these platforms, if you attracted customers. I think it would be a very interesting experiment. So we've now entered what Charles Handy back in 1989 called the portfolio world of work. He wrote a great book, by the way, called The Age of Unreason. And this is the idea that, our life is now arranged around our passions, right? Our activities, our interest. Some might be paid, some might not be paid, but it's a completely paradigm shift in terms of how we work. Single job for life versus a portfolio of work. And the goal with a portfolio life is not necessarily to always maximize income, but to maximize work-life balance and to maximize happiness. And this might come as kind of a shock to some of you. It doesn't mean that income's not important, but it means that to step back and look at your life a little bit differently, right? You can make a lot of money but not be happy, and you could be really happy and making. You could be unhappy and making a lot of money, but you're not making it in the areas that you really enjoy. True happiness, I've discovered it in work and in life, comes when you're able to maximize the ability to make money, but also the ability to do what you enjoy. So I think this old dream of just, chasing, as I like to call it, financial freedom and the escape from work. In other words, I'm going to work hard so when I'm off of work, I can do what I really enjoy. I think that's fading away. Why not just be able to do both right now? As I like to say, when you do that, then you can't tell the difference between Monday and Friday, work and play, vacation, and vocation. And, this comes naturally to some of us easier than others. I mean, the younger generation is learning how to combine multiple skill sets and generate many income streams. And I think that's good. They can teach us. So the idea with a portfolio life, it's really never complete versus the old model. If you work, you retire, and quite frankly, you die. Statistically, a large percentage of people die within 10 years after they, quote, stop working. So I'm not sure why you'd ever want to do that. The idea is to do what you love, and then you never have to stop. Okay, maybe you'll slow down a bit, but that's the idea. So the portfolio model really challenges this old advice to, just work at what you're good at. I always suggest that the wrong reason to do work is because you're good at it. You must really enjoy it. You must really enjoy it. It's better to be interested in something and not know how to do it because you could teach yourself how to do it versus being really good at something, but no longer interested. So the idea now in the world of work is start to become more curious and to invest in yourself. And technology is, on one hand, technology is driving a lot of good change, a lot of enabling change. But I'm afraid that some employers might go in the wrong direction. Many have already started, tracking everything they can because of all this technology, with the virtual time clock, tracking everything that everyone does. Tracking how much time people spend online and what they do, and how much time they spend on their break. And there are many tools to do all of this, and I've listed a few. And of course, I suggest not to do that. If you trust people, they'll do the right thing. The more you micromanage and monitor people, they will do the wrong thing, from my observation. COVID-19 has driven and will continue to drive permanent change in the way we work. We're seeing more now a trend, and we'll see this grow over time, that employers are going to want more access to your personal health data. Of course, this raises privacy issues, more of a need to take temperatures, and there'll be more and more, apps to monitor the level of antibodies that you have, and so on. So, we're seeing new changes in how the organization not only views work, but views the people that work there. Google kind of had this right. Back in 2012, they started a project which they called the Aristotle Project. And among other things, the idea was to try to understand what are some of the attributes that need to be in place. What are some of the common platforms that enable people to work well together? And I think those ideas are more important than ever today. So automation will actually also drive the need for more human skills. By 2025, many millions of jobs will be, for sure, lost to automation. And that was before the crisis. But I'm seeing a need, even a demand, for more soft skills that computers can't replace. The ability to be creative, to think from different perspectives, from different angles. The idea to be able to work across different disciplines, right? To use your skill sets to work across different disciplines. To be a better creative thinker, right? To be able to think from different perspectives, to look at different alternatives and pros and cons, and to think from different sides. Complex problem solving. So these soft skills, I think, are more important than ever before. The Gardner Group, even said that, prior to the COVID-19 crisis, the percentage of people working remotely, they predicted would grow to 50%. And now we're seeing that number is even, growing higher, as I mentioned earlier. It's possible that many people will never go back to the office. Henceforth, the need to work in different ways. A lot more of us have spent our lives, in Zoom sessions, like maybe you're doing right now with me. Although this can be exhausting, it's kind of, I think, increased more empathy. How many of you have now looked at your colleagues in Zoom meetings at home and seen their cats and their dogs and their children and their spouses and their houses? And it's kind of brought, I think, us closer together as humanity. But we can get tired from all of these Zoom meetings, and I always recommend to organizations that they make sure that they don't overdo it. The good thing with Zoom meetings is you have to schedule them. When we're at work, there is a lot of impromptu meetings. Some can be good, but most can be, time wasters. But the workday is definitely getting longer, and we have to carefully manage that to avoid burnout. I think, though, there are requirements that companies are going to have to implement to retain people more than ever before. I think there's going to have to be more social safety nets, from expanding mental health coverage to maintaining compensation when people can't work. And yet, as I note here, many companies are going to need to move to a contingent worker model. So more flexibility is going to be required. And for example, HR professionals are going to have to facilitate more partnerships versus more control. And I think there's going to be a need to spend more of a focus on results, right, versus time in the office. And I think we're seeing a shift from critical roles to critical skills. Again, I think physical offices will be on the decline. Office design, has already started to change, and I think will change dramatically in the future for good. In terms of social distancing, protective equipment, and so on. Much research has suggested that these days a large percentage of our workers, people that work, are just feeling more depressed than ever before. And I think this has to be something that is dealt with and acknowledged. This is why I teach and talk about the need for more humanistic leadership, the idea of putting people over profit, putting people first. More companies are going to be hiring health workers. So we're going to see a rise in telemedicine. And the bottom line is companies are going to have to shift from recession-proof to pandemic-proof. I don't think this idea is going away, unfortunately, anytime soon. But the workforce is also going to have to change. Gen Z, 90 million Gen Zers are going to have to learn to lead a multi-generational workforce. Imagine the conversation between the 25-year-old manager who's managing the 65-year-old intern. We will see that. And that, of course, is good. And it also, will lead to more appreciation of the different generations and the need for more skill sets. Gina Beld, a researcher, she phrased this term perennials. And that means that, all types and ages are no longer defined by stereotypes in their generations. And so I think that's good as we start to look into society and start to look at people not by whether they're a baby boomer or a Gen Z or Gen X or millennium, but about who they are and what they can contribute. I've noticed in my own research that the generations are actually coming closer together these days than farther apart. Because of what's going on in the world, more and more people want and are seeking meaning, and purpose in their work. I mean, the Gen X's, ages 38 to 52, kind of grew up where survival of the fittest was the main driver. But I think even this generation, I think, is under pressure, is seeing the need for finding more purpose in their work. Also, life expectancy, I would say, was growing in the U.S. Back in 1960, for example, in the U.S., the average lifespan was 53, went all the way to 72 in 2015, and 2020, it was expected to be 79. And so the idea for many age researchers was that, the idea about 100-year work life was growing, which is great. But I must say there is a concern now that COVID-19 might slow this expectancy down unless, we take better care of ourselves. But it's still going to be more common to hire people in their 60s and 70s. And this will have implications on the ways we work. I think the demand for a new workplace environment is also here. Many people, as I mentioned earlier, are requiring workplaces to provide just more human connections, more meaning, more transparency. More and more people want a voice in their own decision-making. More people want support for a debt-free education. That's a good idea. And more people want, I think all people want, frequent feedback. No one wants to wait any longer for the annual performance review. And more companies are really shifting, I think, to more team-based models versus trying to decouple, as I like to say, the individual performance from compensation and really look more at team models, which I think is good. And it will enable us to work better in virtual teams, given we're all going to be all over the place. Not everyone is going to be in the physical office as we look at the trends of work. I think interview questions are starting to shift. It's no longer uncommon for the interviewee, when it's their turn to talk, to say, "Hey, tell me." When the interviewer says, "So, do you have any questions?" "Yes, I want to know why I should work here. And how are you going to, enable me to have meaning in my work?" And as I say to people who are in the situation, if the employer can't answer that question, you're gone, because this is all important. So what can we learn from some of these ideas? I think through a common crisis, I think we've all found, that we have something in common around the world that, we didn't have before. And that can bring us closer together as humans. So I do think with the right, innovation, this can transition us to hopefully a more humane way of working, together versus apart. And that's one, thought that I want to leave you with. So this was meant just to give you some short ideas and important ideas to start to think about not only how, how you work, but how you might start to enable others to work in ways that fit them best, independent of time and place and where they work and why they work and how they work and what they work on. So I hope I've inspired you to start to think about this. So until next time, I hope you have a good day or evening whenever you're viewing this, and I'll see you in class real soon. Take care.